Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Falsifiable Podcast. I am your host, Eric Denton, and I have with me today, he's been a recurring guest. This is Michael Shermer, author of many books, his newest book being Truth. And I'm going to give the subtitle here, and that's actually what we're going to dive into first. The subtitle of this book is What It Is, How to Find It, and Why It Still Matters. We're going to do like an hour talk here. I don't edit these videos. They come out as they are unless the my interlocutor wants something out. But let's start with that and then we'll zero in on a few things. What is truth, Michael?
Well, I define it in the book as something confirmed to such an extent it would be rational to offer our provisional assent.
Mm,
That is to say, there's just so much evidence that, provisionally speaking, we'll say it's true with a small t, right?
gotcha.
So it's really, it's very Bayesian, somewhere between 1% and 99% confidence that it's true, never 0% or 100%, just in case.
Mm,
And then the more evidence you have, the higher your confidence should be that the claim is true. And the lower the evidence, the lower your confidence should be. And so yeah, I just start there and then build, and then I make distinctions between different kinds of truths, external objective truths versus internal subjective truths is one cut that I make at the start. That is to say, I don't mean my personal truth is and then you expound on some objective reality. I mean, there are internal preferences, just the way you feel about preferences for food or music or art or whatever. That science can't really say much about. And if you want to get into it, we could talk about, the internal states of your conscious mind and how would I know that what those are? I don't, and so
mm,
I don't think science can get at that. Which is the hard problem of consciousness. I don't think is a soluble one,
mm.
which is why I put it in that category. And the book is, a known, unknowable, not just unknown. But anyway, uh, but the moment you make a claim that something is true, then you've moved from the realm of internal subjective truths to external objective truths. Then I have the right to ask, what's your evidence for this? So if somebody says, well, I had this incredible dream or this out of body experience or this wild trip I took on ayahuasca or whatever, to me, those are still all in the realm of internal subjective truths. I can't get inside your head to know if, the spirit beings you saw on your trip were real or not.
Mm.
But most people that have those experiences, they then make the shift. They want to say, no, but that's just not in my head. I mean, it's actually out there.
Right.
And that gives me the right to say, okay, then show me the evidence for that because I don't know. I can't get inside your head to see what you saw.
hmm Yeah, so okay, well, you've just defined what truth is to you, and also you've defined like different variations of truth. Like, you have like Jordan Peterson style truth, like symbolic truth, and you have actual truth, whatever. But okay, so how do you find it? That's the next question here. How do you get at
Yeah.
truth?
Yeah. Well, I do pay some respect to Jordan Peterson and Joseph Campbell and other mythologists to talk about the value of mythic truths.
Mm,
And I would throw in their religious truths as well, along with literary truths. So you just take the simple, obvious one that everybody would agree. Novels are just making up stories and plots and figures and characters and relationships and so on. They didn't actually happen.
right.
But if you're asking that, is there really a Middle Earth somewhere on the planet that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote about in The Lord of the Rings? What are you talking about? It's a novel that you just made it up, right? It's fantasy. But
Mm,
there's a deeper truth in the story
mm,
about human relationships and power and deception and and so on, and love and jealousy and so on. That's what makes great literature great. Jane Austen novels or Dostoevsky novels and so on. There's a deeper truth in there
mm.
that I think it's missing the point to ask if they're really true. And of course, everybody would agree with me on that. And then so shift from there to mythology. It's like, yeah, they're dragons. There's probably not really dragons, or maybe the whole dragon thing is based on some flared lizard or, some kind of ancient dinosaur story that people made up when they found the bones, whatever it is. And so, but people would agree that, yeah, but the story of the dragon consuming your life. This is a Jordan Peterson story,
Mm.
right? The dragon isn't real, but the metaphor of the dragon or the myth of the dragon represents something in your life. It's consuming you and it's eating you, something like that. Okay, so and then I think most people go, yeah, yeah, okay, I get that. And then you shift to religious truths. Was Jonah really swallowed by a great fish where he spent 3 days in the belly of the fish alive somehow, and then he gets spit out on this other land? Okay, I think I can get most religious believers, people of faith and Christians and so on to go, yeah, okay, that probably didn't literally happen. Because the
Right.
moment you say that, then a biologist could legitimately ask, how do you live for 3 days inside the belly of a whale or great fish or whatever it is? And but you're missing the point of the story. It's almost a kind of a resurrection story. 3 days, and then you start over in this new land, that kind of thing. And so I could get most religious people to go with me that far. But then when I say, so maybe the resurrection story itself is just a story. It didn't literally happen. Probably somebody named Jesus existed. He was probably crucified. The Romans did this routinely, and but he did not rise after 3 days.
Mm.
He's just dead. But the story itself has deeper metaphorical or mythical or religious truths, meaning behind it. Forgiveness, starting over, and moving on and starting a new heaven is within you. We're going to create heavens on earth here. It's not a place to go; it's a place that's here, and so on. And then, but most Christians at that point, Eric, they go, "Oh, hang on, hold on now."
Yeah.
No, no. As Christians believe it literally happened.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the moment you say that, then I could say, well, then how did this happen? I mean, how? Well, it's a miracle. Okay. Yeah, I know. But what's the evidence for it? And if you really look at the evidence from an objective perspective, it's pretty weak compared to other kind of extraordinary claims for which you would require extraordinary evidence.
Mm. Okay. So, why does this subject matter? Why does truth matter? Would you say, like, right? Especially nowadays, we have a lot of
Yeah.
problems with truth. So, why does it matter?
Yeah. Well, it matters because, there's a lot of claims that we're living in a post-truth world.
Hmm.
So this comes from both the left and the right, that kind of left postmodernism, lit crit. There's, deconstructing the text. There is no absolute objective truths. And that applies not just to literature, but also to science, which, in the 80s and 90s was accused of being just another narrative story, no better, no more true than any other literary story or anybody else's personal truths.
Mm.
And then on the right, you got the fake news, alternative facts. Just flood the system with shit, as Steve Bannon said, and then
Hmm.
we'll tell them what the truth is. So it's coming from both sides. And so the point of my book is to say, okay, actually, there's no such thing as post-truth. The moment you say we're living in a post-truth world, you're making a claim,
Mm.
and then you're going to give me evidence for it, and I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to evaluate your evidence. We're off the post-truth page. We're now talking about there is an actual truth to be
Mm.
found. You're claiming it's that we live in a post-truth world. I say, well, I don't think we are, and then we're debating. So right there, you've just lost the debate because
Right.
you the
Yeah.
moment you open your mouth and start giving me evidence, that's not post-truth. You're claiming there's a way to know if a claim is true or not. Okay, so I'm just saying, let's get back to the tools we have for understanding what's true. And, it's come under assault even more so post COVID because of all the
Mm.
uncertainties during the pandemic, all the
Yeah.
truth claims made about masks and social distancing and vaccines and school closures and all the stuff that we went through for years. A lot of it turned out not to be true.
Mm.
And that's okay if it's if it's a low information area that we can't figure out what's going on yet. We need to gather more evidence. As long as you just say that. But they didn't
Yes.
say that.
Right.
Here's the truth. Masks don't work. Don't wear them. Nope. Never mind. We changed our mind. Masks do work. You have to wear them. Or the schools must be closed or else, millions of children will die. Oh, never mind. We were wrong about that. Okay. That's fine. It's fine to be wrong. It's fine to change your mind. In fact, it's a virtue to change your mind when the evidence changes. But my criticism of the public health sector, and then also the CDC and people like Fauci and Francis Collins, is they made truth assertions too confidently rather than couching them in some kind of probability. Like,
Mm.
we're not too sure about the mask thing. We think they probably work. Here's what we know at the moment. This is our recommendations. We might give you different recommendations next week when we have some more studies. The
Mm.
average listener will go, yeah, okay, I get that. Sure. All right. But they didn't say that, so
Mm.
that's my concern.
Yeah. Okay. So now this is what I sort of want to zero it in. You've been on this podcast before. You've talked to people a part of the Conjecture Institute now, a lot of Popperians, and we Popperians sometimes sound a bit pedantic whenever we're talking to people about things like truth and reason. And even somebody like David Deutsch, who I love, I just emailed him, by the way, and I was gonna get him to come on right now and
Oh,
I was gonna, yeah, as a
oh,
surprise.
oh, that
But
would be cool.
I know, I was like,
Oh,
oh, and he responded literally right before we got on, and he was like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do it. But I was like, it was just
oh,
totally
darn.
last minute. But anyway, so
Well, we could do it another time with him and make it
yeah,
a different conversation.
I would love it because I was like, my wife was like, well, how would they know what to talk about? I was like, well, Michael just wrote a book about truth, and this is what David does with his life. This is what Michael does. They're gonna be fine, you know. But anyway, so let me get to what Popperians sort of think of. And before I
Hmm.
do this, though, and you've talked to Brett Hall too, which I saw that interview that you did with on some channel, but it was fascinating. And I don't want to mirror a lot of what he said. I just want this to kind of be a companion piece because he and I agree on a lot when it comes to this. But you in your book, and actually you did it in Conspiracy too, you claim that knowledge is justified true belief. Can you explain that for a moment and also explain the Gettier problem and some of the complications with this idea of justified true belief?
Well, that's just kind of the standard philosopher's definition of knowledge, justified true belief. Justified by what? Evidence.
Mm,
And then how much evidence do you need? Well, how extraordinary is your claim?
mm,
So there I then branch off into the Equity principle. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, sometimes called the Sagan, I don't know, Sagan wisdom or the Sagan principle or something. He didn't create that phrase. That actually goes back to David Hume and then was popularized by some other people in the earlier 20th century. Then he picked it up and used it in the episode of Cosmos on extraterrestrials.
mm,
And so I then riff on that in the book with what I call Sagan's Dragon. He has the thought experiment that he got from somebody else in his 1996 book, Demon Haunted World. So
mm.
I have a demon. I have a dragon in my garage. Speaking of dragons, would you like to see my dragon? Yeah, sure, that'd be cool. I mean, I love him from mythology and stories, but they don't really exist, do they? Oh, yes, they do. I have one in my garage. Okay, so I take you to my house. We open the garage door. You look around in the garage. There's some of my old bicycles and wheels and paint cans and ladders, but you don't see any dragon. And I go, well, okay, this is an invisible dragon. And you're like, oh,
Mm.
an invisible dragon. Okay. And then you suggest, how about we sprinkle some flour on the floor of the garage, and then when it walks around, we'll see the footprints. Well, you see, this invisible dragon hovers about a foot above the ground. It's a levitating invisible dragon. You're like, yeah, that sounds a little fishy, but okay. How about we get one of those remote thermometers that they use during COVID where they point at people's foreheads to get their temperature? We could point it around the garage and we can kind of get the heat signature outline of the dragon. Like, well, this is a cold-blooded dragon. It doesn't give off any body heat. Well, what about the fire? This is a fire-breathing dragon. The fire must be hot. No, this is cold fire. Okay, at some point you're going to go, what's the difference between a invisible, levitating, cold-blooded, cold fire-breathing dragon and no dragon at all? Right?
Mm.
So the point of the story is that there is no difference.
Right.
So here's your Popperian, falsification. If there's no way to falsify it, there's no way to test it, then what are we even talking about? This is not in the realm of science at all. There's no way
Mm.
to find out. And at that moment, you can then invoke Hitch's dictum, as I call it, Christopher Hitchens' famous quote: "That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence."
Right.
I think
Okay.
Bigfoot is. You think Bigfoot is real? I say, okay, show me. Well, I can't show you. It's like, okay, then I can dismiss it without having to continue the conversation.
Right.
Show me when you have something. Otherwise, same thing with the aliens. You know,
Yeah.
all the congressional hearings about UAPs, you know, breathless interviews with people that said, you know, I know somebody that
Mm.
actually touched the spaceship, worked with it, examined the alien bodies. Oh, wow. Okay. Who is this? I can't tell you. Well,
Mm.
where were they? Where were these bodies and ships housed? Can't tell you. It's classified. It's like, okay, you know, at some point, we got to see it, or else there's no reason to believe it all.
There's no there the buck doesn't stop anywhere with that kind of thinking. The goalpost is constantly moved and there's that you can't get at anything unless you can falsify it essentially. So the way Popperians think about it is that knowledge basically comes from guesses, and we don't even think of educated guesses. We just think of guesses in general. So for instance, most scientists for a while thought that induction was how science comes about. This is the idea that you see evidence, what you call evidence, for instance, like Darwin saw uh, different things, and then he realized, oh, or he saw different species, and he was thinking, you know what, I think that these things are different because they change, and I can see this because of the evidence of this change. The problem is a lot of people think that this is empirically done. The thing is, you don't see evolution happening. Nobody's ever witnessed evolution happening. You do see evidence of things, but you had to have a theory in the first place, a theory that you were mapping onto the world, and then that theory had to run into a problem. So, for instance, like in his day, people believed that the Bible was true. Darwin goes on his HMS Beagle voyage. He comes to the Galapagos archipelago. He notices that all these species are slightly different on each island. And then he starts speculating, well, wait a minute, though. If the Bible is true, why are these things all different on each island? But especially the Noah's Ark, like where Noah's Ark happened, there should have been like a lot of species where that happened, and it sort of petered out as land went on. And he started noticing this problem, which is that all these species look different and they match their surroundings. And Dawkins talks about this, like a key within a lock, like on these different islands. And then he speculated in his mind, he made a guess, which was, you know what? I think that these things they're all coming from one thing in the past, like a single animal maybe, and they evolve slowly through time. And he had to think of an idea of how this would happen. And his idea was that natural selection, which is again something you can't see, it's not an entity, it's a process, is taking place where things are forming. And anyway, so this is how knowledge grows. And we nowadays take this as true. Like I, not creationists, obviously, we take the idea of natural selection as true. Now, me as a Popperian, I would say, well, it's not, and you would say this too, actually, Michael, it's not certainly true. We can never say something's certainly true, but it is true. But again, it's just a guess. And he had no induction happen in this. He didn't see evolution happen. He created this out of thin air, and it started with a problem, which was, the animals are different. This came up to a provisional solution, and to this day, it's still provisional. It could be overturned. It's highly unlikely, but we thought that of Newton, and here we are today. So this is what knowledge is, essentially. But
Mm.
the thing that I think to notice is that um, uh, nothing is justified here, though. There's no uh, we have no way, there's no criterion for justifying any of these truth claims. We just simply make guesses, and Deutsch added this great addendum to the Popperian worldview, which is the idea of good explanations. This is just simply the best explanation on offer. Therefore, we have to take it seriously. And every other thing has failed, even though people still take them seriously, like creationism and stuff. But they do that because of faith or whatever the case may be, and cognitive dissonance and all plays largely into this. But this is the idea I'm bringing this up, is the idea of justified true belief. Knowledge, in my opinion, or in my worldview rather, is never justified. We can't, there's no basis of which to justify anything. What would you say to that, Michael? Do we have any daylight here or?
Okay, let me riff on some of that. First of all, Einstein's relativity didn't displace Newtonian mechanics; it just adds to it. Newtonian
Mm,
mechanics still works pretty good. I mean, if you want to get an object to the moon, let's say a spaceship to the moon, you don't need a lot of general relativity except for just fine tuning. But the further out you go, the more you're going to get some distortion. So you need some Einsteinian tweaking of your orbital trajectory and so on. So it's not that it was wrong; it was just incomplete.
right. Yeah.
And so now, in the case of Darwin, your story is, roughly correct in the outline, but Darwin didn't figure out any of that on the voyage. It took him several years afterwards. In fact,
Mm,
it wasn't in, so he was there. His trip was 1831 to 1835.
right.
He was in the Galapagos. He landed September 18th, 1835. He was there for a couple of weeks. I spent the night on the beach with Frank Sellaway of Darwin's first overnight camping on San Cristobal Island. Okay, and so he was a creationist on the voyage and all the way for the whole 5 years. We know this because it wasn't until he got home and then he opened his first notebook in 1837 and started speculating about his finds. And it turned out he got some of his specimens incorrectly labeled, bird specimens.
mm,
And then he realized that an observation that the governor of the islands, at the time they were governed by the British Empire, now they're run by Ecuador. So they had British names at the time. Now they have Spanish names.
right.
In any case, San Cristobal, whatever it was, the British name of that was the vice governor of the island said, I can tell you which island each tortoise is from based on the carapace, the shape of the shell, the back shell of the tortoise. And Darwin thought that's really interesting. Why would that be? Why are these tortoises specialized on different islands?
Mm,
And he wasn't really actually speculating about that until his notebook in like 1837. And we know this also because he didn't record which islands the different specimens he collected were from. So
mm,
he wasn't thinking like an evolutionist while he was there. He was thinking like a creationist. In fact, they collected hundreds of specimens of the giant tortoises, Galapagos tortoises, from different islands and so on, and threw away the data on their way to Australia. They ate the tortoises and then threw the carapaces overboard. So
mm,
we know he wasn't an evolutionist. And he also suspected, because this was the accepted theory at the time, why is there variation in species? Well, because there was an original created kind, and then there's variation around the created kind, and those variations they're like dog breeds, but they're not
mm,
becoming cats. They're just dogs, right? So this
right.
was the theory at the time. So it's not that well, one variation is becoming a new species. That's not possible in the creationist worldview, and
Mm,
that's what Darwin thought all the way up until he spent several years trying to figure it out, and it kind of the light finally comes on. So, was it an induction process? Well, as you correctly point out, not exactly because you can't see any of this. It's inferential,
mm,
over long periods of time. But much of science is that way. I mean, you infer of the discovery of the planets Uranus and Neptune were inferred by their perturbations on the inner planets, Saturn and Jupiter and Saturn and Jupiter. The orbit of these giant planets are being tweaked somehow. So there must be something out there further, right around there. And so you point the telescope, and there it is, right? So
mm,
there's kind of an inferential process at work there. Now, I don't like the word guess because the average person hears that. You mean scientists are just taking wild ass guesses? I much prefer David Deutsch's good explanations and bad explanations. And
mm,
this also allows you to acknowledge other people's ideas instead of saying that's just wrong or it's bullshit or it's nonsense. You can say, well, that's an explanation. That's an interesting explanation. But is it as good as my explanation? Right. So I use this with creationists who, talk about the origins of consciousness or the origins of the moral sense or origins of life or whatever. These are the big God of the gaps arguments that they make. And so I offer my explanation, which takes like 20 minutes or so to fill in all the details. And I go, okay, that's my explanation. What's your explanation? And their
mm.
explanation is some variant of, well, God did it. It's like,
Right. Yeah.
okay, that's an explanation, but it's not a very good one because there's nothing to do with it. How
Right.
did God do this? Is there a way to falsify your hypothesis? Because you can falsify my hypothesis, but the God did it is just a kind of a hand wave explanation, and it's a bad explanation because it doesn't lead to anything. There's nothing more to do from there, right?
Mm,
So that's how I think about that. So by justified, I mean in the case of the theory of evolution, it's accumulated over 150 years of evidence for it.
mm,
So that's the justification part comes from, just experiment after experiment, collection after collection, specimen after specimen, and so on, converging evidence from multiple lines of inquiry, geology and geography and zoology and botany and physiology and genetics and paleontology and archaeology. They're all coming to the same conclusion.
yes. Yeah.
Overall, so it's not like they're meeting on the weekends to get their story straight because of the crazy creationists. They don't even know each other,
Right.
right? They go to different conferences, they publish in different journals. Excuse me. And so that's how I think about that.
Yeah, well, this is another thing that you mentioned that basically the underlying current of what you just said there is like your credence in the idea of evolution grows with the more you accumulate evidence for it over time, which is sort of a Bayesian way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Is that yeah?
I
So
think that's how science actually works. I don't think scientists are very Popperian in their actual process. This is a problem, actually. Once
yeah,
you're locked in to your paradigm, it's hard to get motivated to find evidence against it. We know
right.
this from cognitive research on confirmation bias and so forth. Everybody does it. So the whole point of like peer review and so on, and replication and verification and constant testing is that if you don't try to refute your own ideas, somebody else will.
Right. Yeah. John Eccles wrote a book with Karl Popper called The Self and Its Brain. And people thought that I heard John Eccles in an interview and he thought that or people were like, man, you're crazy. You're the guy that we heard about that tries to refute his own ideas. And he got it because he became so close with Karl Popper. Uh so but anyway, so this idea of a credence growing, though, like this is a belief system, and this idea of credence, I think, is actually fictitious because there are no numbers attached in your brain to ideas. So something becoming more true in your mind doesn't actually make it more true in the world. So this is what a Popperian would say. Like,
Hmm.
and a rationalist might say, well, but in real life, this is how we operate. This is how we make decisions. Is like you have you feel more confident in something. Your feeling about it is more confident. Therefore, you're going to do that. But the problem is that's actually not that feeling makes no difference on the reality of the situation. You're doing what you're doing because there's a better explanation at hand here. It has nothing to do with fictitious numbers in your head. The idea of Bayesianism, I think the stuff with Bayes works whenever you have actual probabilities. Like, say, for instance, if you have a deck of cards and you have whatever it is, 64 cards and there's four aces or whatever. So you could use Bayes in there. You say, okay, you know all of the numbers involved here. The problem with using Bayesian thinking on like larger open-ended things is that you're using numbers that don't actually exist. So you have an idea of like this is what happens with AI and stuff like that. We have a 10% chance that the world might be doomed. Well, if that's the case, we should be friggin' doing something. And that's actually what Ted Kaczynski did. He took that seriously at one point in his mind, and that actually caused a lot of issues because the man was insane. But I'm working on something that has to do with this right now. But like,
Hmm.
but yeah, so the idea of like these numbers, I actually think that and this is talked about by epistemologists, Karl Popper being one of them, David Miller being another. Many people do it, and I don't understand it all, but I do understand the concept of the idea of a credence growing or lessening plays no role in the real world if we're talking about the real world. And as far as just to address the idea of the um, what is it uh oh, we were talking about Einstein. Who came before? My brain just went blank. Whose theory was before Einstein's?
Newton.
Yeah,
Newton.
Newton. Yeah, Newton. his theory wasn't like you said. It has a his theory lies within Einstein's theory. But the thing is that whenever we're talking about science, I like to think about things as we're trying to explain reality, not use it as an instrument necessarily. So Einstein's is true, whereas Newton's is actually false. If you think about it, like it's false in like in the real sense of the word false. I mean, we still use it whenever we go to the moon and stuff like that, but if we want to talk about reality, the reality of reality, the best thing on offer right now is Einstein's theory of general relativity, and then you have quantum mechanics is even truer. You know, like we know that Einstein's wrong in a sense, and we know quantum mechanics is wrong because they don't match up. But those are the best ones. Actually, quantum mechanics is the best one on offer. But what do you to anything I've just said? Do you
Well,
have a
yeah,
response to any of
sure.
that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, for example, the experiment that made Einstein famous and put him on the front page of the New York Times was Sir Arthur Stanley Eddington's eclipse experiments in 1919 to measure the distortion of the starlight behind the sun as it passes near it and gets distorted according to
Mm.
Einstein's predictions of the warping of space-time. So, for those not familiar with this, how do you measure the starlight behind a sun during the day? Because the sun's blocking everything out. Well, in a total solar eclipse, you can see the stars behind it. And if you've never done this, if you've never been to a total solar eclipse, it is just striking how dark
Mm.
it gets. And you can see the planets and stars, and it's really something. So Eddington, so now Newton had a prediction. He said, according to my theory of, gravity, what gravity is, the starlight behind it should be distorted a little bit. It's being kind of pulled by the gravity of the sun. And
Mm.
Einstein said, "Well, I'm predicting because my theory is a warping of space-time. It's going to be bent this amount, which is more than what Newton said." So Eddington went to test this during the eclipse. What most people don't know about this story is that there was actually two eclipse expeditions, and one of them found the data, Eddington's, closer to what Einstein said, and the other one data was closer to what Newton predicted.
Mm.
So which one is right? Well, Eddington liked Einstein better than Newton's theory, and he kind of pushed that, and turns out that was correct. I mean, subsequent measurements showed that Einstein was right and closer to the truth than Newton. So, but even there's a good example of a falsification process. We're going to test it. We're going to see which one is more accurate by collecting the data, but it's not as clean. And because it was cloudy for the one eclipse, the one that found for Newton, it was a little cloudy, and Eddington had more influence on the publication process. Well, that data is not as good because it was cloudy, and so on. And so anyway, so it's kind of a sociology of science
Mm. Yeah.
example
Yeah.
of how these things work, but it is the falsification process. But again, then why would I stop there? Well, because then after I read about that story, my history of science studies, like, well, then how do we know which one's right now? Oh, because there's been a bunch more experiments since then.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, okay. So this is the cumulative process of, Bayesian growing in confidence, another experiment and another one and another one and another one, Einstein, and nobody's finding for Newton. It's like, okay, my confidence continues to grow that despite the shenanigans of Eddington and the other expedition, whatever, the one was right and the other one was wrong because here's a bunch of new data, right?
Right.
That was
Yeah.
that was JBS Haldane's famous quip about what would it take to falsify the theory of evolution. He said, "Fossil rabbits in the Precambrian." Okay. And that never happens, right? It would falsify it, but it never happens.
Mm.
So our confidence continues to grow as paleontologists continue to find more and more fossils. It continues to support the theory of evolution more and more. So our confidence continues to grow. So I'm not sure why you're not comfortable with that idea. I'm still not quite getting it. I mean, it's both Bayesian and it's Popperian.
Well, it's because it has an implication of belief in it, and the idea of belief to me has no bearing on reality. That's the problem. I think that if we're talking about belief, you could be talking about, that's the realm of religion and stuff in my mind. So the idea
Well,
of
okay, maybe let's find a better word. My confidence in.
still the feeling, that's a human feeling. I think that when we're talking about reality, what Einstein was doing and what Darwin was doing is trying to explain the world. as opposed to trying to which they might have been helping themselves like emotionally or something. Actually, Darwin wasn't. He was petrified of his idea. I mean, his whole life was spent with gastric problems due to most likely due to his worrying about these things
No, most likely he got a bug in in South America. I know the whole story behind that. Yeah, maybe it was because there's one theory about this: his mother died early, and he's raised by a, sort of a cold, distant, hardworking father. This was John Bowlby's theory of attachment.
I'm actually
Charles.
reading. I have this book. It's A New Life.
Oh,
I know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm reading
Anyway,
that.
I think it's more likely he just caught a bug in South America. Anyway, uh, but just kind of back to that larger issue. Belief, confidence, whatever word, should I get vaccinated or not? Well, okay, it doesn't matter what I believe. Should I behave? Should I take this action or should I not? I have to make a decision. All right, let me see the evidence. What does the CDC say? What does Fauci say? What's the latest research on this? Myocarditis, will my heart, am I going to have side effects? How many people? I want to see the data. So
Mm.
there, I'm looking to whatever word you want to use. I need to make a decision. I'm either going to get vaccinated or I'm not, and I have to make a decision. So that's a kind of a that depends. That's a very Bayesian it's signal detection theory based on kind of Bayesian calculation. When should I make the decision? This sort of the signal detection problem of hit. All right, the claim is this: should I do it or not? If I do it and I get better, that's a hit. If I don't, that's a miss. Whatever.
Right. But in that case, though, I think a lot depends on the person because some people are very, based on some sort of explanation of how their body reacts to things. Again, it all kind of comes back to explanations. Speaking of this though, and let's touch on this again though, Michael. I'm very cognizant of our time. Let's do like 20 more minutes here, but like liability. When you were talking about this, always comes to my mind when we were talking about Fauci and all the people that made a lot of mistakes during the pandemic, as far as masks and school closures and all that kind of stuff. I kind of think a lot of that. This is my own theory on it is that these were not malicious mistakes, obviously, but these were mistakes of they were scared of having the liability. They didn't want people to die,
Hmm.
so therefore they were very restrictive. I
Hmm.
work at a place right now that's very safety conscious,
Mm.
and to the point where it's almost stupid. Some of it seems like sort of like idiotic in the way that it kills common sense. But I understand what they're up to there. They don't want to be held liable for anybody being hurt. I tend to think that a lot of people make the government sound like they were supposed to be perfect about this.
Yes,
And the fact that,
I agree.
yeah, and the fact of the matter is like these are just people, and the problem they don't want blood on their hands, so they went with the most
That's
restrictive
exactly right.
thing.
That's
Yeah,
right.
so
Yeah. It's
but
exactly the same thing when I go into a liquor store to buy a bottle of wine and I get carded. Eric, I'm 71 years old. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
really? And
The-
the poor employee is like, dude, because I always make a joke about it. Right? They're like, I'm sorry. I have to card everybody. They don't, basically, we don't trust our employees to make a signal detection cut or hit or miss. Right.
yeah.
So it's like, just card every single person no matter what. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's what it is. It's a protocol that they're going with. And I kind of think that as far as all that goes, that's what the government went in. Now, what happened with the conspiracist's mind in those moments were that there's something malicious going on here. They were trying to restrict our freedom. These people. And I'm like, what? The people that go home and watch Netflix at night want to restrict your
Yeah.
they're regular people. Who are you talking about?
Yes.
Some cabal
Yes.
that's behind it. And the thing about this, and this will lead into something here, and this will go back to our knowledge scenario. I think of people, we are explainers and we are universal explainers, and people that are conspiracists are trying to form a theory to explain the world. They're trying to make things simpler by explaining something. But we did this way back whenever language evolved, or people started forming theories about how the world is, and they might have said something. I don't know this, but like the cave drawings and all that we find, where there's things going on, and they were trying to explain something about the world, and they probably believed that there were gods of the rocks and gods of the this or gods of the that. Um, Again, we're trying to explain something. It wasn't until uh I guess around the Greeks or whatever that we realized like you can actually criticize these ideas and then their error correction starts kicking in and like a little mini enlightenment happens there. But um yeah, I think that as far as all this goes, I feel like people are just trying to explain the world, but most people who just watch the news or just aren't interested in science like you and I are, or and I'm not belittling this. I'm just a normal Joe. I love science. I read all your books, Michael, and I read a lot of books. But um, people are simply trying to explain the world, and the reason they just don't know, they don't have the right criteria, I guess, for delineating what's true from false. But they tend to go with like these simple explanations. They tend to rely on malicious attitudes by people of some sort. But anyways, my point is that we're trying to explain the world, we're trying to get at truth, but yet we have many problems.
Okay, a couple
Yeah,
things there, Eric. I think most of us don't know much about anything,
yeah,
right? Who has time to fact check, all the research on this particular vaccine and so on?
true.
I don't, or the next thing is, immigration policy, or what we're doing in Iraq, what we're doing in Ukraine or in Gaza, or then you shift over to some trade agreement. And I have thoughts about all these things, but it's like they're not very well informed opinions, right?
Right,
I
yeah.
really depend on other people. Like, so I tell the story of my friend Andrew Stuhlman at Occidental College, cognitive psychologist. So he asked his undergraduates, "Do you accept Darwin's theory of evolution?" "Oh yeah, of course, yeah." "All right, explain it." "Oh well, the giraffe stretches its neck, and the baby giraffes have longer necks." No, that is all right. And so what they're doing when they say, "Yeah, I believe that or I accept it," they're just signaling, "I trust the scientists. They usually get it right, I guess, and all my professors tell me it's true. So yeah, whatever." And I think that's the case for most things.
Mm,
You see something on the news, like I use the example of the Chinese spy balloon. Okay,
mm.
but like, what would it take, Shermer, for you to believe that aliens have visited here? The equivalent of the Chinese spy balloon, right? It's no more grainy videos and blurry photographs and stories about spooky things in the night sky. There it is. I mean, photographs,
Yeah.
video. The jet flies up. It's filming it. It shoots it down. There's the debris in the ocean. We have it. Now, I didn't personally see the Chinese spy balloon. I'm in Southern California. It was going across northern United States. And I didn't go to see the debris myself, but there I'm trusting, that all the major networks, the president, Secretary of Defense, the Pentagon, everybody said it's real. And,
Mm.
to me, it's like, okay, I guess my credence there, my confidence, it's probably real. I don't have the time to go check it myself. So I'll just accept it. There, I think, is a very Bayesian way that we live our lives in a kind of a pragmatic truth sense. It's the evidence is it's good enough for me to say, yeah, it's probably true. Now,
Mm.
other areas where that's not clear, there's a lot of gray area that then we just go, I don't really know who to believe, right?
Mm.
Like just take the ice activities in Minneapolis. You have video. It's like, well, video that should clear it up. No, you have the exact same video clip on repeat, repeat, repeat on MS Now and CNN versus Fox News and News Nation, and they're describing the exact same video in completely opposite ways. You can clearly see here she's doing this. You can clearly see here she's doing that, and it's like, okay. So there, Eric, I think there's the sort of politicization of truth, where
Right. Yeah.
even straightforward visual evidence is not enough. We I don't there it's much more tricky.
Yeah, that's why, again, though, that's why I think belief or feelings are a problem when it comes to explaining the world. In that case, actually, what you would have to do, I mean, you will never get at like, first of all, the truth of that is like, if you look at the video, the guy was standing sort of in front of the car. She swoops around, he shoots her,
Yeah,
shoots her, shoots
yeah,
her.
yeah.
And the thing is that, my thought on that is that the only way to make the claim that this guy murdered this woman in the way that some people are saying is that we'd have to see police officers in that very same scenario uh, handle that situation because like a lot of the claim Sam Harris did a podcast on this and he was talking about he's heavily against what happened there. He thinks that was I don't think he would say murder, but he just thought that was extremely just very bad training. So that made me think. I was like, well, I
Hmm.
wonder. I would like to see like a well-trained police force though in that scenario, because I know you did a
Hmm.
video on it, and you made some of the things you were saying was that when people are very excited, they do. You never know how people react with
They
excitement
snap.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
they snap. But again, if you're well trained to not
Yeah, but I
snap.
think a lot of these guys are not well trained. I think that's
That
part of the
exactly. So
problem.
that's my so in this case, so what you just said there makes the administration liable in a way for
Hmm.
this happening because
Hmm.
they're
Partially liable.
they're
But also,
hiring.
see, I also I'm a big personal responsibility guy.
Yeah,
Radical responsibility, radical ownership. I think Jocko Willink calls it. Jocko Willink. That you put yourself there. You chose to go there, and you weren't on the sidewalk peacefully protesting. You're out in the middle of the street screaming at people. All
right.
right,
Yeah,
is that peaceful or not? Well, I guess a court could decide that in a lawsuit. But in the meantime, you have to own some of the consequences. You know,
yeah,
these are armed guards, big guys with bulletproof vests and so on. They got clubs and guns, and you're going to go up there and spit at them and curse at them and blow whistles in their face and hope nothing goes wrong. Well,
right.
good luck
Yeah,
with that. Okay, maybe you're
yeah.
in the right, but if you're dead, too bad.
Yeah, I think that again, yeah, that one's a tricky one because there are so many variables at play. Actually, I don't
Hmm.
even have a big emotional attack. I mean, it's just so terrible to hear this, but like lately I've been the kind of news consumer that's literally just I listen to I'll tell you my news diet is that this past couple weeks I've had a very long drive to work. It's literally almost an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back, and I work almost 12 hours a
Whoa,
day.
Eric,
So
wow.
yeah, I'm always busy.
So
And
you must listen to audiobooks
oh
and
man, I've listened to
podcasts.
that's how I listened to you and Destiny the other day, and I
I
told
see.
you about that.
Okay. Oh,
But yeah,
oh,
so
right.
yeah, and that's what gave me I was like, oh my gosh, I got to talk to Sherman about this new book because this is fascinating. But so my point is that like lately I've been a normal news consumer. I've not been like a because I can't listen to like heavy news on the way to work. I got to listen to something I'm very interested in, or else I'm tempted to fall asleep while driving. So I need something very entertaining or music or
Yes.
something. So
Yes.
I've been listening to ABC News in the morning, and I'll get that. But the
Hmm.
thing is, if you only listen to one news source, I hear this news and I think, wow, these people murdered this woman, But I know my
Hmm.
critical mind kicks in. I'm like, well, ABC, they're sort of more. I mean, they're going to be more tended liberal and all this. So all these factors are coming into place. I'm like, I guarantee if I were to listen to Fox News right now, I would be saying something drastically different. And of course, I get to work and I hear my coworkers talking about it, and they're like, "Man, that woman was an idiot." And she was out there, blah, blah, and like. But I know they're watching Fox News, and so it's just like a
Hmm.
whole. I'm just like, oh my gosh, and I live
Yeah.
in
So there, the answer about the truth is you have to have multiple sources.
right, yeah,
And it's good even if you know that what their biases are. In fact, it's important to know that.
mm,
So like for example, I'm old school, right? So I got the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. So their news stories on the front page news story, they're pretty much the same, but the op-eds are very different. So but I know what they are. I know when I go to Fox News, I know exactly what I'm going to get. I mean,
yeah,
they wear it right on their sleeve, and same thing with MSNBC now, and so on. So that's good. Now, what's harder is independent journalists online, and I follow a bunch of them, support some of them. I like the idea of independent journalism, but they have far fewer fact checkers
yeah,
and editors, right? So like I just had a op-ed excerpt from my book published in the Washington Post. Okay, so that's a huge readership, millions of readers. This is good for the book and good for getting my ideas out there. But it was a lot of work. I mean, there was fact checker after fact checker,
yeah.
and it's like pretty much every single sentence I had to send them a source, and I had already sent them. I mean, it's only 700 words, and I already sent them like a dozen links, and they go,
Mm,
"Oh no, this isn't even close. What about this one and this one and this?" So I ended up with like 2 dozen references for a 700 word excerpt from the book. I mean, it's nothing, right? But I thought, you know what, this is, and then there was like 2 layers of editorial going through it. And I thought, okay, this is actually good, right?
mm,
So that when I read about something I don't know anything about in the Washington Post, I'm thinking and hoping, well, I bet that article went through all that process I had to go through, so I can be reasonably confident what I'm reading is fairly accurate. That's how
Yeah.
I think about that.
Yeah, that's and man, that's good to hear actually. Um so here's the final thing. We got a couple minutes here. I was reading some of the reviews of your book, Shermer. I want to tell you two of them because I thought they were hilarious. This is actually on Amazon. One is got 1 star. I'm going to give you the negative ones just because I think it's hilarious.
Oh yeah.
And 1 star, skeptical of Shermer, he says, remember, this author believed in COVID-19 vaccination and penned an article entitled Vexed but by the Unvaxxed, where he shamed skeptics of the untested, pushed mRNA technology. Why are you pushing mRNA? I'm just kidding, but like what do you
That was so funny. That was an essay I wrote early in the pandemic for Quillette,
mm,
in response to the anti-vaxxers and the conspiracists. That the vaccines are a way to control the population. Bill Gates is going to. So that was the point of that. So I mean, fair enough. There was another one on there about they heard me on the WNYC Brian Lear's National Public Radio show, one of the biggest in the country, millions of listeners. And we were just having a conversation like you and I are. And then we went to the phones, and one of the callers first starts to rant about Trump and the current administration sucks and so on. I'm a lifelong Democrat, but my own party's been lying to me. They're telling me that men can become women and men can get pregnant, and I'm very
yeah.
unhappy about all this. And I had no idea that the host was like some super far left woke trans supporting person. He's
Oh
like, whoa,
no.
whoa, whoa, hang on, hold on. And then he's like objecting to the caller. And then, what is your opinion? So I gave my opinion. He was not happy about this. No, men cannot become women. Sorry, that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
And I was careful. I made the distinction between internal subjective truths and external objective truths. And if you feel like a woman inside and you're a man, or vice versa, okay, fine. I can't. What do I know? I'm not you. And if
Mm.
that's what helps you get through the night, life is rough and you got to do what you got to do. But the moment you say, and therefore, I think, any teenager that's experiencing the angst of adolescence and says they're in the wrong body, and we should then impose gender affirming care through hormone and surgeries. Okay, now you're making an objective truth claim. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna say what's the evidence for that, and so on. And so there, again, the justified true belief, the cumulative evidence early on we didn't know for sure, but now after about 10 years of research on this, the Cass report in England that shut down the Tavistock clinic that were conducting these surgeries and these hormone treatments, basically said none of these public recommendations and policies were based on good evidence. The evidence was
Hmm.
very poor, in fact. And so here's what the evidence is now. We need to shut this down, and they did. That hasn't happened yet in the United States, but it's about to, because of these lawsuits. There was a woman, a 22-year-old woman last week who won a $2 million judgment against her surgeon and psychiatrist for a double mastectomy when she was 16 years old. And
Mm.
now she wants her breast back. And they're like, sorry, you told us you wanted to be a boy. So like, I was
Yeah.
16 years old.
That's
Where were the adults? And it was based, turns out it was based on two 30-minute consults. That's it.
mm.
So, I
Wow.
mean, right? So
Yeah.
their evidence does matter. And when the moment you make an objective external truth claim.
This is interesting, and this get and by the way, that was the other one I was gonna what the 1 star one where it says Michael Shermer espoused extremely transphobic views on NPR today.
Yes, yes.
So that
That's the
was
one. Yeah. So, I
yeah.
mean, mind you, this is the day the book came out. She didn't have the book. Neither one of them read my book. It's
Yeah.
people just do that on Amazon to try to hurt people they don't like. This is the
Yeah.
world we live in.
That's why I think it's I'm like, oh my gosh. First of all, me and I think I've read almost all of your books, Shermer or Michael, and I love all of them. The only thing that, like I said, we differ on is like our is the Bayesianism thing. Like I think Bayes' theorem is fine, but I think people use it like as if they're talking about probability is used in a way I think is a little bit misleading. It's inductive in the sense that accumulating that to me is not how reality works. This is a strong claim I'm
Well,
making, but like I just don't think that that's
yeah.
think there probability is not something's not probably true. It's either true or false. Like it's not there is no probability in it,
Well,
if you
so
see what I mean.
but the probability question then is in your head. That is, it's okay. So the example I use, let me see if I have this, my coin flip here that I use as an example.
Mm.
I had a silver dollar here. So I used to, oh, here we go. So I don't have the silver dollar. I have a quarter. All right. So I'll flip
Hmm.
the coin and, call it.
Heads.
Okay. It is tails.
Oh
All right.
yeah.
But the moment you said heads and I had looked, we would say, well, what are the probabilities you got it right? Well, 50-50. What do you
Hmm.
mean 50-50? I've already flipped the coin. It's 100% one and 0% the other, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the 50-50 probability is just our ignorance. And
Right.
then we
Okay.
look. Then we look and then go, okay, I'm making your point, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. With that, and again, though, there we know all of the variables. That's my point. There is that again, you can use probability in that sense, and it's completely fine. But the idea of probability, using probability as far as not future knowledge, is like the idea that
Yeah. Yeah.
climate change is going to destroy us this century. Is like some people
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
30% or whatever. That
Right.
people aren't saying that, but that would be like an example. But like. I think
I
that
see your
that
point.
yeah, that's the type of
We can't put real numbers on a lot of these things.
yeah, no,
These
no,
are just made
no.
up numbers.
Yeah, because again, and Brett Hall made this argument to you, and again, like the problem is like you sound like I sound friggin' pedantic whenever I'm making it because I know somebody's going to say, well, you know what Michael's talking about? Michael's talking about the idea that it's probably this or probably that. It's just common sense. But I'm like, yeah, but I'm talking about like hard reality though. I'm just saying that's what whenever I
Yeah,
think of
but again, yeah,
science.
it's
Yeah.
like what are you're diagnosed with cancer. What are the probabilities you actually have cancer? So this is a signal detection problem. And but what we're talking about there is on average in a large population, say 1,000 patients that have an X-ray that looks like this and a blood analysis that looks like that. They have a 80% probability that they actually have that cancer.
Mm.
Well, the person you're talking about either has cancer or they don't. They don't have 80% cancer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I think that's your point, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You know, uh,
exactly. Yep,
because
yeah.
when we're talking about probabilities in like these medical examples, we're talking about large populations.
Hmm.
In 1,000 people that we've tested, 80% of them that show these signs actually had the cancer or whatever the disease is.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that there's false positives.
Mm.
And the problem with this is that no matter how small the percentage of false positives there are, if you test enough people, we're going to test 1 million people. Well, there's going to be a lot of false positives,
Mm.
no matter how tiny that fraction is. It's
Yeah.
only 1%. Yeah. But if you test millions of people, or in the case of vaccines, billions of people,
Yeah.
that there's going to be a lot of false positives. Anyway, so that's, yeah.
Man, okay. So let's I'm looking at the time. We'll end it right here.